Okay, just a few announcements before I start. The producer of this video is Marl Offman, and the subject today is the meeting on October 3rd, 2019 regarding the proceeds, the use of the proceeds from the wastewater treatment plant sale. And it's about 28 minutes of discussions on that. And before we go into it, I'm going to give you some of my opinions. In fact, the next 3 slides and what I'm going to say now is strictly my opinion. And I want to say right off the bat that I'm not for their plan. I think it's a poor plan. It's not well thought out. It's essentially the same plan that Lisa Vanderlane had over a year ago. So that makes me skeptical. But one of the things I want to talk about is the fact that they pulled out $7 million from the sewer fund and moved it into a capital fund, probably to use to buy the promenade. But this was an illegal transfer. It should have stayed in the sewer fund. It should stay there until we receive the proceeds of the sale, so that we can measure exactly what the net result is of the sewer fund before any funds are used or transferred anywhere else. So they're already trying to muddy the waters. I think that you'll find this presentation that there's about $30 million that Mr. Granger wants to siphon off for the Delaware Valley Trust to manage. I don't think this is a good idea. My basic philosophy is that we keep as much money in our control until it's necessary to spend it. We earn the interest, not someone else. So you'll see where I'll discuss this. I use the police pension fund as an example of their poor management skills and the poor management of our finances and our money. So take a look at that. Form your own opinion. I think as far as what will we have to manage after we defease the debt related to the sewer plant, including the $7 million, we should have $83,755 that we can manage. And we should be very careful. This is a huge windfall for this community. We need to make sure we handle it properly. And I think some people have suggested, and I agree with this, that we need to get some ideas from other professional money managers, third parties that are not associated with John Granger or anyone on the board. Get their ideas. In addition, we should have a public hearing to allow any resident of Exeter Township to express their opinions on how they feel this money should be utilized. And finally, you'll see in this use of funds, there's no mention of how they're going to use the money for the promenade. Now, I believe that they're going to just demolish the buildings up there and build new. And this is going to cost us a tremendous amount of money. And the reason why I say this is because it's configured to be a commercial mall. And they want to use it for a fire company, for the police department, for ambulance service, and for administration. The building is simply not configured that way, and it's been sitting there for so long and it's so old that I believe they're going to end up demolishing it. Unless they refurbish it for commercial use and we sell it later on as a profit. That's another possibility. So there's also no mention in these proceeds of using $1.6 million to buy 140 acres of land that's contaminated with coal, infested with mosquitoes along the river, because it fits into their development plan for developing a riverfront property. And I believe they're going to use some of the proceeds to put that in place so that they can woo developers here using our taxpayer money. So enjoy my slides and my further opinions about this issue, and then after that the meeting will start and you can hear for yourself Mr. John Granger telling us what he plans to do with our money. Enjoy. This document was printed in the Reading Eagle Sunday, March 19, 2017 edition. It discusses the savings of $6.5 million in a police contract that Mr. Granger and the supervisors negotiated. This savings will supposedly occur over 15 years. So our dedicated and courageous police officers have given up current salary for hopefully better benefits and pension in the future. I haven't analyzed Mr. Granger's numbers to understand if it really is a $6.5 million savings. I have reservations about his financial acumen. As we all know, he misappropriated almost $2 million from Talamansa Township for his own purposes related to another agency that he managed. And he's provided and published some false and misleading financial information to the public and to the Reading Eagle regarding the Reading Country Club. So we know that, he appears to be ethically challenged at times. And I'm going to talk about the pension fund for the police because, as you'll note, one of the notes I have here, we lost over $1 million in 2018. This is the first year that the Delaware Valley Trust has a full year of management of our police pension funds, which began at $20 million at the beginning of 2018. And we lost slightly over $1 million, which offsets, and that's in 1 year, okay? So it really offsets the supposedly $6.5 million we're saving in the officers' salaries over 15 years. And we have to ask ourselves what is going on here. And I'm going to present some information going forward, some other slides, my opinions. This is my opinion and future opinions before we get to a meeting that I recorded for discussion. They were talking about what they're going to do with the proceeds of the sale of the wastewater treatment plant. And that meeting was held on October 3rd at 6 o'clock at the township location. And I want everyone to understand, anyone who listens to these comments and opinions, that this is the biggest windfall of money this township will ever see. We're going to get $93.5 million from the sale. We know that there's at least another $7 million that was in the fund that they removed illegally. I know what it is. You can see them on video. They don't know where the $7 million came from, and they admitted that. But I know, several other people know. And in total, we're going to have close to $80 million at our disposal. We have to use this money in a responsible fashion so that it lasts a long time. And I'm not buying into their presentation of how they plan on using it. I think there are better ways to use it. Now, I've worked in finance for a long time. I'm certified as a financial manager. I don't think any of these supervisors are, and I certainly know Mr. Granger is not. So here we are, losing over $1 million the first year they're managing our pension fund, and he wants to put another almost $10 million with them. I think this is a bad idea, and as you see my slides, unnecessary at this time. So look at the facts. I will be presenting facts to support my opinions, and you decide, form your own opinions, and you decide if it makes sense, and if there's concerns, you need to get involved. So look at my slides, watch the video of the meeting where they're going to show you what they're going to do with all this money. This is the report that we'll look at from the 2018 audit, combining statements of changes in net position of fiduciary funds. This tells us everything we need to know about what occurred with the police pension fund and the employees' pension fund. Let's focus on the police pension fund. That's the biggest one. And you'll note that in the beginning of the year, it started out with almost $19 million. But really, first what we'll look at is item number 1. You can see under the police pension fund, total contributions amounted to $672,000. $437,000 was from us, the taxpayers, and the employees, the policemen, $235,000. Fair contribution, I think, at this point in time. So here we are, we're adding $672,000 to the fund. But what we could see, if we look at item number 2, the net investment earnings. The fund lost for the pension, police pension, $1,073,000. Now it earned $625,000 in interest and dividends, but look what they did with realized and unrealized losses on investment. The Delaware Valley Trust Fund lost $1.6 million. You see that in the big circle right there. Okay, this is significant. We're losing money. We're supposed to get an 8% return. That's what they're factoring all the calculations on. But in reality, they lost net minus 5.29%. So the spread went from 8,000 positive to a minus 13%. I'm sorry, expected return of 8% to a minus 13% net. So you can see that they also charged us almost $74,000 in investment expense for their professional ability to manage our funds. So we lost $1,073,000, and then if we continue on here to number 3, the total additions net. So we put in $672,000. We earned interest and dividends of $625,000, but we lost $1,006,000. So the net total additions was a decrease in the fund for the year 2018 of minus $400,000. We paid out in benefits. You see number 4. We paid out in benefits for the pension fund, police pension fund, a total of $648,000. That included we paid Delaware Valley Trust another $13,000 for administrative expenses, and if you add that to the investment expense in part of line number 2, there's almost $74,000 there. You can see it was about $87,000 Delaware Valley Trust earned off of our fund. If we look at number 5, and under the police pension fund, you can see that we started out with $18,973,000 at the beginning of the year. But because we lost $1,049,000, you'll see that the ending balance, item number 6, we're below where we started, $17,924,000. You'll see that later on, if you look at change in net position, that's the loss of $1,049,000. But and you can see I point out in item number A, that's the big loss right there, $1.6 million. Total pension trust fund loss was $1.8 million. And then item B, the change in net position, $1,049,000. So this is in 1 year, and Mr. Granger has suggested that we're going to save $6.5 million over 15 years, which is a little bit over, I think, $400,000 a year. So right off the bat, we're losing over $1 million. This is something that, you know, should be shocking to you. They were not transparent enough, are willing to tell us the true results of the first full year that Delaware Valley Trust managed the funds. So I'm telling you, you can look at it. These are the facts. They are indisputable. And you can see that we need to do something about it, because if the fund doesn't rebound and have a higher earning rate than minus 13%, we will have to add additional capital to this. But I think we could do better. Mr. Granger wants to add another $10 million from the proceeds of the wastewater treatment plant into the police pension fund. But I will show you later what our obligation is to the fund, and you'll see that it's, in my opinion, it's unnecessary at this time. And I'll talk more about my philosophy of what we should be doing with the proceeds of the wastewater treatment plant later in subsequent files. But I don't think we should place another $10 million with Delaware Valley Trust at this time. So here are the facts. You decide on your own what you think is appropriately correct. This is the last slide I'm going to present. It shows the changes in our net pension liability for the police pension fund. And we're concentrating on 2018. This is the audited year that was presented to the board and to the public. And I'll just go over a few numbers to give you an idea of what's going on. And we'll look at number one. This is our total pension liability for the end of 2018. So we have to fund the police pension fund to the tune of $20,247,000. And we're pretty close to that. You can see in 2017, we had 99.5% of that funded. So as long as I would say as long as we're over 75% funding, we're in pretty good shape. We can always make up that money anytime we need to. Then we'll look at number two. This is the net change in our pension fund liability. And you can see that because we lost over $1 million with Delaware Valley Trust, it's put us in a bad position where we went from 99.5% funded to 88.5% funding, which is still very healthy. So the plant number three will show you what our liability is today. And it's $2.3 million. And you can see compared to 2017, it was only $90,000. But the end of 2018, it's $2.3 million. Again, if we hadn't lost that $1 million that Delaware Valley lost for us, we'd be in very good shape. And again, we're still in good shape at 88.5%. So there it is, number four. We'll show you 88.5%. It's a good ratio. It's slightly lower than what we had in 2015 and 2016. And the one thing that I want everyone to recognize when they watch the meeting on how they're going to use our funds, Mr. Granger wants to put another $10 million in with Delaware Valley Trust Fund for the pension plan. 10 million, but you can see right now our liability is only 2.3 million. And I don't think we should be giving Delaware Valley money that we don't have to give them, so that they can earn returns on that money, which would not benefit us directly. We should keep the money in our control until it's necessary to use it. And he's also proposing another trust fund, which he would most likely put with Delaware Valley for another $9 or $10 million, just for the sake of investing it for us. Another bad idea, considering the poor return that Delaware Valley has shown us in the first full year that they've managed these pension funds. The whole concept is we keep this money in our bank account, not someone else's, until it's required to be paid out. And I'm concerned because I'd like to see Mr. Granger sign a document that says he has no interest in Delaware Valley Trust, that he has no family members who have an interest in Delaware Valley Trust, that he has no associates who have interest in Delaware Valley Trust, and that he has never had any financial interest or any involvement in the organization of Delaware Valley Trust. I am very suspicious about this relationship, and I think everyone in our community should be as well. This guy's talking about doing stuff with our millions and millions of dollars that I feel very uncomfortable with. And as I've said before, I have no confidence in his ability. I have no confidence in the ability of the current Board of Supervisors to understand what is going on or to even act in our interest. Folks, this is the biggest amount of money. It can really affect us, our community, for decades. You better get involved. You better take an interest, or I think you're going to regret it someday. It will affect home prices. It will affect standard of living. So please, take this seriously, and let's do something about it.
Yes, afterward, yes.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Mr. Hughes, are you recording this meeting?
We are recording this meeting.
A couple of housekeeping items. This is, again, workshop meeting. We're going to discuss the proceeds of the wastewater treatment plant. Please stay quiet during the presentation. At the end of the presentation, we'll have one public comment from Mr. Kemp in relation to the proceeds of the wastewater treatment plant. This is a special meeting. It shouldn't take too long, so we're going to go through it. I ask you to stay quiet and pay attention, and I think you'll like what you see.
You're leaking there. You're leaking.
Great. With that, I'll turn to Mr. Granger.
Okay. The agreed upon price is $93.5 million. Next slide. The objectives that the board has set forth over a period of time, not only for the use of proceeds, but also for the township in general, is to maintain the current level of general fund real estate taxes, which is 2.145 mils. Also, anticipating using the proceeds to fund infrastructure and capital needs and provide funding for a homestead exemption, which would apply to all residentially owned property, owner-occupied residential property. The proposed actions to reduce general fund expenditures are to eliminate all general fund debt service, to fund the OPEB requirements. We had a presentation on that a few meetings ago. Fund the pension plan requirements. That was in the same meeting that we had the OPEB discussions. Fund capital expenses and fund equipment requests. The homestead exemption is proposed in large part to offset some of the impact of the sewer rate increase that was earlier this year. So, from this point forward, we'll go through a series of slides that will show the cost of several of these actions. So, the first thing we are required to to do, this is not an option, is to pay all of the outstanding debt related to the sewer. Because you don't have the asset, you have to pay this debt off. This debt is not callable, so the number shown up there in red is greater than the amount of principal interest that you have to pay. The reason for that is you're paying a higher rate of interest than the current rate of interest that you have to borrow money to pay these off with. The functional way this works in the world of finance, the township's financial advisor will buy instruments called slugs, state and local government instruments. They're all AAA rated. They generally pay between, what is it, 2.5%, 2% right now? Interest 2%. So if you're paying off a bond that's paying off 4%, you need to pay the principal plus the 4% interest because it's not callable. You have to pay that interest rate to the bondholders until maturity. So in order for that calculation to happen, you have to pay more in principal because you're paying less, you're earning less in interest. So the cost of defeasing this debt will, in any of these cases, because of the current financial situation, is you're paying more to defease the debt. So if you, in this case, you know, after we pay it off, you'll have $76.5 million left over. This next slide shows the outstanding balance in the library construction and the Penvest. This is general obligation debt. It is not the sewer debt, it's general obligation debt. And we're proposing to pay this debt off. This is also not callable. So we'll have to pay this off. This is the principal and interest payments per year for each one of these issues. The impact that the homestead exemption has is significant. Because you pay real estate taxes are based on your assessed valuation. The real estate tax includes the general fund tax, the debt service tax, and the fire tax. So when you are paying the debt service tax pays the Reading Country Club.
Hear that.
All right. The Reading Country Club debt is included in the general fund.
I'm going to hear it.
Right. The Reading Country Club debt is the debt service fund of the township. Because the homestead exemption is put in effect, the income that was in the 2019 budget to pay the debt service, it will be less in 2020 because of the homestead exemption. That dollar amount is about $225,000. You have some options how to recover that amount of money in some fashion so that you're not raising, you cannot raise your taxes if you do the homestead exemption. That's a state law. So you have to keep your tax level the same. So if you're going to keep it the same, you have three options. You can utilize investment income from the bond proceeds. You can retire some of the debt of the country club. In this case, we're recommending you consider retiring a taxable debt because it is the highest interest cost debt on the country club. Or you can retire all the debt. There are three options. The chart on the left shows the balance of the in the Reading Country Club debt if you defease to taxable notes. And you notice that every year there's a fund balance up until 2040 where there's a large payment, and then the payments drop off, they're less, and the fund balance increases. So until the year 2040, From a standpoint of keeping the level the same, you would leave the revenue, you would not reduce your taxes in 2021 or 2022, because at some point in time you'd have to raise the debt service because of the debt service requirements of 2040. But beginning in 2041, you can begin reducing your tax, because after 2046, there's no need, that's the last debt service payment, and you can reduce the tax to zero. All right. And these are the debt service payments requirements on the two taxable debts for the Burning Country Club. You'll note the what's called a balloon payment on the right for the issue that was done last year. And that would have to be paid off in 2027. That is one of the reasons why you'd want to keep some cash in your fund balance, so you can pay that off at the. So now we'll go back to the next slide. If the general fund is defeased, you're defeasing your general fund tax, which is $2,131,000. That's your outstanding principal and interest. And you defease the two taxable notes at the Burning Country Club, you'll have remaining proceeds of about $70 million. Now, there is an option to retire all of the Burning Country Club debt. Again, if you do that, you'd still retire the general fund debt, $2.1 million, and you would be required to defease all of the Burning Country Club debt, which is $21 million, and that leaves you a balance of $53 million left over. Now, as we go through some of these slides, we will be showing them in the defeasance of the taxable debt, and down at the bottom of the slide is what impact the defeasance of all of the debt would have on the balance of the proceeds remaining. So we'll keep track of both numbers going forward so you can see the impact of the decisions that the board will have to make. One of the issues that is important to consider, if you defeat all of the debt, you're foregoing about $300,000 in interest earnings on that difference that could become accruing to the township to use for other purposes. And as interest rates rise over years, that number will only increase. We started this calculation about 18 months ago. We were in the 3.25% range, and now we're at 1 3/4 to 2% range. So interest rates fluctuate over time. When I was younger, the prime interest rate was 18%, and I wish I would have had money to invest in, because I think I'd made 20%. But things change over a period of time, and in likelihood, rates will modify, and they'll go up again in the near future. Near could be defined 5 years, could be 10 years. But if you have that principal, you have the opportunity to earn more interest because you have the capital there. Now we'll switch from debt to the OPEB and the pension matters here. We talked a little bit about both of these at a meeting or so ago. This is just a reminder. We're required by our collective bargaining agreements. All township pension plans are defined benefit plans. They were established a very long period of time ago when a defined benefit plan was about the only thing you could do. And because of collective bargaining agreements, it's very difficult to change them. The police, they are under Act 600, which requires a defined benefit plan. We've been talking with the Teamsters about a defined contribution plan and are having a very difficult time trying to change that. So in all likelihood, when we settle the agreement, it will remain a defined benefit plan. So what we're trying to do here is reduce the expenses that the township would incur over a period of time to fund both of these plans, all three plans. So we had a presentation a couple weeks ago about that with Township Actuary. I think that information is still on the web someplace. If not, we'll have it available to you. So again, if this slide shows the country club taxable note defeased, and then the amount of funds required to be deposited into the police and the employee's pension plan to fully fund the plans, and that would result in a reduction in the annual payment that the township makes from the general fund into each one of those plans. You'll see at the bottom two numbers. If you defease the taxable notes of the country club and do all the recommended changes, the balance of the proceeds is $60 million. If you defease all of the country club debt, the remaining balance is $43 million.
What's the interest rate of the non-taxable?
I can't hear that.
What's the interest rate of the non-taxable?
It's around non-taxable debt around 4%. It varies, but because you're at the end of the notes, you're paying a higher percentage. This is on the OPEB. We had a conversation about this same time we talked about the pensions. OPEB is other post-employment benefits. This is health insurance benefits that are paid to retirees for a substantial period of time. Now, because we eliminated the requirement for all new hires after 1/1/17, both of these tables end because the obligation to make those payments end when no employees are receiving benefits. So the table on the left is the fund balance and the requirements to pay every year to meet the obligations. So next year we would be required to pay about $200,000 or so, and the payment, I'm sorry, the table on the right, the payment goes up to over $900,000 at some point in time when there's a majority of the employees retired. And as the employees are no longer collecting benefits, then the payment to the township goes down. What we are proposing to do is invest some money, $9.7 million, into a trust, like a pension. They can invest in stocks and bonds, and that principal and the interest will pay for the cost of the premiums to the employees until there's no longer a requirement to pay at some point in time. So the cost, the column to the right, the table to the chart to the right, goes away. You're no longer required to make that on an annual basis because you've furnished the cost up front. So the cost is, the total cost over the lifetime of the benefit is somewhere around $30 million. So if you make a payment of just under $10 million, you're saving the community the expenses of an additional $20 million over the next 20 or 30 years. So again, if we're going down and making a deposit into the OPEB trust, the remaining proceeds are $50 million if you pay off the taxable notes, or $33 million if you pay off all the general fund. Now we're moving into the away from the benefits into the operations of the community. There's two primary areas we're looking at. One is storm sewer improvements. When you look at your requirements in the infrastructure, the roads in the township are in very good condition. There's very few things you need to do in terms of the roads. There are some culverts that need to be replaced. The board is authorized, the engineering plan, prepared plans for the Butter Lane bridge culvert replacement. They're doing the design work now. The construction work will be done next year. That's a couple $100,000 to replace that. So the engineers come up with, and highway superintendents come up with a list of storm sewer improvements that will have to be done at some point in time. There are things that you cannot not do. So they have to be done, so they are future expenses that you will incur at some point in time. So if you have the capital to set aside to do those, we're recommending you put that aside in a capital fund to pay for those improvements when they're required. The plan of attack is to design one, like this year we're designing one project. Next year we'll do that project, but next year we'll also design the project after that. So you're designing a project in 1 year, constructing it in next year. When you're constructing that project, you'll design the project for the year after that. It takes about a year to 18 months to design a project, primarily because of the requirements for environmental protection, because there's stormwater, there's going to be turtles, there's going to be all kinds of stuff. Street.
None of those vodkas.
Yeah, it's just a process we have to go through. So the value of that work is about $4 million. So you put that $4 million aside in a capital fund. The remaining proceeds are either $46 million or $29 million. The last one is equipment replacement. We have a very big rolling stock inventory. It's well over 100 units. Have to be replaced. It's an annual cost. Every year something has to be purchased. So we're proposing to set aside $6 million in this fund that would replace the value of all your equipment over a period of time. Now the interest earnings in this fund and in the park capital fund and in the equipment fund, or the capital fund, interest earnings stay in that fund. The other additional income coming into this fund will be from the sale of equipment. You noticed in the past several months we're selling equipment. We put that back in this fund to pay for the next piece of equipment you're going to get. There are opportunities at some point for grants. We got a grant from DEP to pay for a part of a couple of trucks, so that revenue stream would come out of here. We're going to here in the expense, and we would offset the expense here. So again, you are reducing your annual expense that you have to pay every year to buy a police car, a car for a highway garage, car for the parks department, a mower, or whatever, by funding that requirement in a separate fund. So you're reducing your annual expense to the greatest extent you can. If you do that, the remaining proceeds are $41 million or $23 million. Now, what we've done here is the first step in the process. We'll have more, we hope, at the meeting on the 10th. This shows you the value on an annual basis of making all these changes. So just go through 2020. The debt service fund, if we pay the retired debt, you're saving $356,000. The OPEB contribution next year is going to be about $200,000. If you fund the OPEB, you don't have to pay that. Police pension is about $325,000. That's for both pension plans. The storm sewer work we will be doing next year is $900,000, and the equipment replacement is $247,000. So if you fund these through the use of the proceeds, you'll be extracting $2 million out of the budget, but you don't have to budget for. They carry that through each year. They vary each year because the expenses primarily for the storm sewer and the equipment will fluctuate. So this is the first step in terms of the impact that the use of proceeds has on the general fund budget and the township budget. We'll have more information on the impact to other decisions that the board has made over prior years will impact both of those funds as well. That's the presentation, Mr. Chairman. The board, aside from funding all of the various elements here, the storm sewer, the debt service, I think the primary decision the board and the public need to make is to what extent you want to reduce and how you want to level your payments or not payments on the Reading Country Club. It's a big decision. I think we will have more information to share with the board at the next meeting. But that is a very big implication because of the difference between the remaining proceeds if you do it or not do it. And what impact, because if you, we'll have more information on it. It's a little premature because I don't have all that data registered. That's the presentation.
No, thank you. I want to thank the administration and the board for putting this together. I think it was great. I think that's when we sold the sewer plant was to get out of the trouble that we were in financially. So I think it makes sense, and we being transparent with the public. This is kind of where they're going to go along with the proceeds and setting up this. So now we have some decisions to make, obviously next week. So we kind of wanted to show both options and then take it from there. We'll go around the room. Jeff.
I just wondered if we would discuss potentially setting up a capital fund for the Reading Country Club, and then we would outsource the operations. Is there a way that fund could work with an operator, or would it be restricted because of us being a municipality?
Well, I would offer that. I'll have a discussion outlined for the next meeting, but I'll offer this tonight. The work at the clubhouse, primarily clubhouse, and also both the clubhouse and so work that needs to get done. Unfortunately, we have to pay prevailing wages. There was a conversation about that issue last meeting.
Carl's here. Come on, Carl.
The impact of paying a prevailing wage on a construction project is tremendous. You know, with 30 to 40% of that cost is additional to the prevailing wages. So let's take the country club. There are certain things it needs. New roofs and windows, a couple other things. They need to be done. Now, the township could do it, and it might cost $100. If you are going to have an operator come in, and you tell him it needs to be done, he might be able to do it for $60. So he can do it at $60, but that affects the amount of money that he may pay you in a lease. So it may be that you're paying for it one way or the other. Essentially, you're paying for it through not getting money for the lease, or you're paying for it out of pocket, but you're paying it at a higher price. So I would strongly suggest that the board think about, here are the things that the country club needs, both in the building and the course. We're willing to do this, whatever this is, but we want you to do that, and we're willing to take, we understand that if you do that, we will get less money at some point in a lease. I mean, you don't come right out and say that, but you know, as you negotiate a lease, there's a value of those things, and that value is translated into the cost that the operator will pay the township. I think you save money in the long run doing that, as opposed to going and paying for at a higher price to do this work. So I think.
Well, I guess what I was saying too, and I appreciate that info, but I was thinking more along the lines like we would, you know, discuss maybe setting up a capital fund. If for things we would need maybe next year unexpectedly, or in the future if the township's still operating it, we would have that money there earning interest. But then if at some point we would get an operator, would we still be able to access that cash, like you said, to
if you budget, let's say you budget $80 to put it at the Reading Country Club, and because you get an operator in April, pick an early month in the year, you don't spend that $80. Well, it's still in the capital budget, and you could use it for something either that year, or just not use it that year and use it for something else the years after.
Right, okay, so there wouldn't be restrictions, basically.
Okay.
Yeah, you just have to be careful not to put too much money into it, obviously.
Well, yeah, exactly. Yeah.
But that's a decision that we will illustrate to you. Here are the things we think the clubhouse and the grounds needs, and there's some prices. And we'll recommend. We definitely going to recommend one thing you do because it's on a roof. That's, I don't want to go through this again. So you do that. The rest of the things you can either decide to do them, or decide to use them as part of your negotiating with an operator. And that's your decision to make.
So, real quick.
Wait. All right, I got it. Go ahead.
So, we don't have a choice to pay prevailing wage, right?
That's a requirement by law.
Right.
Over some dollar, I think it's $25,000.
Right. So it keeps coming up as an issue, but I mean, I don't see it as, I mean, prevailing wage is actually like union wages. What do you mean?
In some cases, above union wages. It is.
But
Just
at that point, but I'm just saying, you know, maybe if we would have had some, you know, quality, you know, if J Major or whoever did the roof for him would have had, you know, maybe if it would have been a prevailing wage, it might have been a better quality job. We wouldn't be replacing it after only a couple of years.
I'm not saying that paying prevailing wages is a bad thing. I'm saying that the contractors typically pay reasonably good rates. Prevailing wages adds on additional reporting requirements, probably some additional benefit requirements, as well as rates of pay, hourly rates. It is, by and large, the cost of meeting the requirements. Every week we have to get a report on what they paid everybody. If you don't have a prevailing wage, you can pay the guy the same amount of money. And if you're not prevailing wages, you're saving yourself money because you don't have that accounting function and that function of an audit, somebody coming in and audit. Did you pay that guy that right amount of money? That's a cost to the business to pay prevailing wages that are factored into the cost of the job, not what you're paying the operator or the mechanic to do the work. That is a big cost and difference in prevailing wages.
Dave.
Question on the equipment replacement fund. Is that specifically a physical asset like a tractor or something? Or if you were putting a pavilion at Trout Run, did that come out of this fund, or where does that happen?
I prefer to have several different funds. So the capital fund would pay for buildings, roads, storm sewers, anything that's related to just a capital investment into the community. Equipment is for equipment. Highway, automobiles, trucks, cars, stuff you need, that kind of stuff. We also have established a park fund because there is a lot of third-party money that can be used for park improvements. So it provides a little bit more clarity that the parks go with parks, the equipment goes with the equipment, and the capital is just general capital needs of the community that's not either parks or equipment. It's primarily building and roads because you have operating nothing else.
Yeah. Or you put in a retention pond or something.
Yeah.
So now, is a capital fund, is that in good health? I mean, we're not putting any money into that.
Well, the storm sewer improvements is the capital fund. It's primarily for the storm sewer improvements. Your roads are in excellent shape. I asked Clarence early on, what's broken? He said, I need these storm sewer culverts. So, and there's some money that we will put in there as not part of the proceeds, but other money that we'll put in there for other improvements. The streetscape project will come out of there, and there's money set aside for that. The library, if we get a grant for a library, there's a match required for that. That was presented in part last meeting, and it'll be a part again, not on the 10th, but on the 15th. We'll show you what individual projects are in there, so you have an idea of what in the capital fund is being paid for. But this is just...
So the capital fund, if they were going to do a second entrance to Trout Run, that's the capital fund.
Actually, to come out of the park fund, because it's a park project. Sorry. It gets one, but it's in a separate thing. You'll know where it is. That's where it'll be funded out of, because while it's a road, it serves the park.
Now, John, where do we have the fire department? Because of the loss to the business.
I'm sorry?
Because of the loss to the Homestead Fire Department.
That'll be a discussion at the next meeting. There's two things there that are relatively important. First, they'll lose some money because they're part of the tax structure, so their payment from the township to the fire company will be reduced. But of the $6 million there, $1 million, we're proposing $1 million of that goes to the fire company for their fire apparatus fund. They have a very good apparatus replacement plan that the township has been making annual contributions to the fire company to fund that. If you put $1 million in that apparatus fund, that will solve their equipment needs for the next 40 years. So by doing that, instead of the allocation of the fire tax that goes to the apparatus fund, that money can be freed up to help offset the loss of revenue from the homestead exemption. It's almost dollar to dollar, but it's not quite. And that'll be part of the conversation that we'll have next week on the 10th. We'll have the actual numbers to show you and what we recommend for that particular item.
What safety protocols do we have? So that if, say, someone was like, oh, I'm going to take $50,000 out of the equipment fund for something that it's actually not for. How do we have that safety?
Well, it's all budgetary. There is no, I mean, the board sets the budget, and you could defund the capital fund, you could defund the equipment fund, and you could defund the park capital fund at any time you want.
Well, I understand it, but I guess I'm just trying to say, like, it's not like John just can't go, hey, let's...
You mean like internal controls?
What kind of internal control, right? So that it's not like one person, it might be, like, it's going to come out and probably going to be the board and make that decision. It would be...
The board, when you buy a piece of equipment, you buy this piece of equipment, it'll come out of the equipment fund. Right. Part of the authorization. When you fund a storm sewer project next year, here's a dollar amount for this project, it'll come out of the capital fund. Okay?
Right.
So, and each individual item will have, each individual project has its own budget. Although they're all lumped together in the way the budget is presented, but there is subheadings under that that shows all the engineering and all the capital expense for doing the work, construction.
Okay. I just want to make sure it's as transparent as possible and that the public is always aware. And if we do move it from another, I want to make sure that it's a good record that we're doing it. So. Great.
Any other questions from the board? Mr. Kemp.
Is that Mr. Kemp, still Kyle, K-Y-L-E?
Yes.
Okay.
KEMP, 330 Lorraine Road.
First of all, Kyle, how's the trout run? How's the truck trail system?
Oh, well, I'm going to address that. I'm going to advocate that we spend some of this.
Can you get closer to the mic, please?
Sorry. I'm going to advocate that we spend some of this 41 million or 23 million on some other projects besides sewers and equipment. First on my list is to pay off the country club.
Well, that's in there.
I know. I made this list before I saw that list. And then, what about the legal fees with HJM or JMH regarding the country club? Isn't it up to like $700,000-800,000 now?
$890,000.
It's almost $1 million. I'm saying use some of this money to pay that off. Is that a possibility? I mean, somebody has to pay that money. Is that coming out of the budget, or are we taxpayers paying for it, or can it be paid for by the wastewater treatment plant proceeds? Just an idea.
Right.
Then I'm going to advocate that we spend some money to upgrade the Exeter Trail. It's been in for about 20 years, maybe longer. Not much money's been spent on that since it's been put in, and it's starting to show its age. I mean, yes, you mow it every year, a couple times a year, but that's pretty much what's done. It's mowed. And I did advocate for a little stretch that was ponding with water, and Clarence did take care of that by raising it up. But now, as I said at the meeting on Monday, it's very rough. it needs to be covered with the screens. And there's another rough section that's very low and close to the river. The screens have been lifted off over the years when it had floods. That needs to be macadamized. It makes no sense to put screenings back on. They'll be lifted off again during the next flood when the river overflows. So I'm saying let's spend some money to bring the trail up. And the parking lot's a mess. The parking lot's a mess. It's in the shade all day. There's mud, there's decaying leaves, the vegetation on all the sides is overgrown. The parking lot needs to be upgraded. It is a mess. And nothing's been done for 20 years, and it looks it. Right around the corner from there, between just up to at the meeting, between the New Gibraltar Road Bridge and the woods, people are now parking along the woods to access the river. And it's all impromptu. There's no official parking lot, there's no official boat launch, they're just using the bank that's there. I say let's spend some money to upgrade that, make it an official boat launch, and put a parking lot there. So it's an actual facility to encourage people to use the river. And then that parking lot could also be overflowed. Sometimes the trail parking lot on a beautiful day is full. I see people park along the road. Well, then they can swing over around the corner and park on the boat launch parking lot if that's not full. So I'm saying let's spend some money to make that an official boat launch area with an official parking lot paved or stone or whatever. They're just parking on the weeds now.
Is that all Exeter, or is there some, is that part the other?
It's part of that.
It's right on the border.
Yes, with some of that land PennDOT that goes with the bridge. Well, I don't know. You'd have to research that. I don't know. I mean, there's no markers there saying PennDOT Township, but that would have to be researched. And if we would need some of their land to make it a nice facility, we'll then approach them about some sort of agreement that we can do that, because they don't need all that land. The bridge is built. The bridge is done. The extra land, well, you need some extra land to access the underside of the bridge for maintenance, but they don't need that whole stretch. So I'm saying let's spend some of this money on to make that a nice facility. I'm trying to do this 21st century way here, but it keeps screensaver keeps blanking out. And then speaking of the Exeter Trail, years ago there was talk of extending that along the right-of-way, the sewage right-of-way, which the township already owns, to either the Lincoln Corporate Center all the way to the treatment plant. That was not followed through on because there were two adjacent landowners that were very adamant against that trail extension. Donald Pfeiffer and his partner in Buddy's Nursery, I forget his first name, or Hart was the last name. Well, both those men are now dead for years. So there should be no violent opposition, as they were, to extending that trail on the right-of-way, which the township already owns. Eminent domain already took place to establish the right-of-way for the sewer. You don't need to do that again to put a trail on it like you did from Gibraltar Road West. It's already there. So I'm also advocating to take some of this money to extend the trail further, because people like riding on trails on their bicycles and not having to deal with cars.
Does maintenance of that trail, does that fall into the parks budget, or is that? What's that?
Yeah, one of the things, Clarence said at the last meeting that they would get there and mow the grass after they're done with the mowing. I think they were finishing up a couple of little projects, and they'll get down there and spread the screens if they haven't already done it. I'm glad you articulated things about the trail. Earlier this year, the board authorized the engineer to prepare plans for the second access trout run that would be along the trail. Be at Gibraltar Road, and we'll go back through that way. That project provides an opportunity to do everything you had spoken about. We're planning to have several projects back there. One we'll do, one we believe that the American will most likely do, which is to replace the sewer line and install a water line in the same area. But the plans that we are preparing, that we will present to the board probably in the first quarter of next year, will show the road, a trail that'll be wider, longer, wider, probably paved, be with lighting, a parking lot, and a boat ramp. We do need to acquire some right-of-way. We're beginning that early. The area's been flown. We have some pretty good data points on this already. They're starting the bog turtle survey and all that other stuff to do that probably next year when it's appropriate for the bog turtles to show themselves. But that is something, you know, when, in terms of how it would happen, if we can get the engineering design next year, we will submit a grant application to the state to support the construction. The board will come up with a construction plan and the cost and how we're doing it, and the construction most likely, if the star, suns, and all they line up correctly, will occur in 21 or 22 at the latest. It depends on the engineering is rather difficult to do here because of the environmental issue. There's some wetlands we got to get around and all that kind of stuff. And if we get some state grants, they take a while to unfold. Example, we signed the grant for the Daniel Boone Homestead April of last year. We got the return document from the state signed by them July of this year. Lost a year. Okay, and you know what? They were electronic signatures. So those are some of the headaches we run into all the time. So what I'm trying to say is we're working on it. We'll have plans for it. It'll take a while to unfold, but the end product will be, I think, a very nice benefit to the community.
Okay, well, I'm glad to hear that. And I didn't know all this stuff. I don't attend every single meeting.
Right.
So if I'm repetitious here, I apologize, but I'm glad to hear that. But like I said, and you know, there's this grant money available, you still need match money. And that match money could be some of this
that's part of the funding process.
94 or
we'll have a
3 million.
fundraising campaign. We'll put your name at the top.
Oh, okay. Okay. Okay, well, thank you.
But I think it would be definitely having you as somewhat of a liaison to pick his brain about it. I mean, he definitely seems to know a lot more about each other.
Well, and that's because I was a volunteer with the Greenway back in the 90s when we were blazing the trail, the Squiggle Trail, when there was brush to be cut that was 10, 15 years old. And I was the volunteer coordinator of the volunteer group that had a weekly work day most of the 90s. So that's where I get my trail experience, functional-wise. But I've also been on trails in probably 8 other states and also Southwest Germany. So I guess you could call me a pseudo-trail expert.
Yeah, you can help too.
You can always use a trail consultant, right?
Yes, so I'll have to work up a consulting fee.
I heard volunteer.
We did. That was in the past, though.
Yeah, we need money today.
Right. So,
thank you, Mr. Kemp. Appreciate it.
Yes, thank you for listening.
And one follow-up on that. So that's most of the stuff we're doing is Gibraltar Road West. Do we have looked at Gibraltar Road East?
No.
I thought that, I thought I heard that was done in the past. I looked at it and we couldn't do it, but I mean, in the future, can you actually connect the whole thing up?
Yes, that is definitely, it is a doable thing. In order to be successful, you need to have 1 or 2 successes.
Yeah.
And park projects, the homestead, and the second access will make other things happen.
Yeah. Okay, last public comment, Mr. Gaultier.
Greg Gaultier, 11 Nancy Circle. It's a question, really. I just want to make sure whether I heard this correct or not. There's a meeting on the 10th.
Yes.
And Mr. Granger's going to be giving more data and numbers.
Yeah, what we did, Greg, was we had the budget meetings as a workshop. We had 1 week, and then you were next one.
Yeah, I understand what's going on.
We had 3 workshops, and then next Thursday is going to be the one we put it all together.
Okay. So there's going to be additional data at that time.
Absolutely.
And I thought I heard you say that you'd be making decisions next week. Was that correct?
No, that was incorrect.
The next meeting is, we need direction. We need direction.
I got the process. I was concerned that you were going to make decisions next week, and you still haven't got the data.
No.
Okay.
There'll be preliminary budget approved, just like the school does it. One comment for the public. Tuesday, October the 8th, 5 p.m. at the library will be the Service Electric cable television workshop. Remember we said we wanted to do it because it's a big deal. So that's 5 p.m. at the library, Service Electric franchise agreement.
I have a question. I have a question.
Motion to adjourn.
Go ahead.
We could use some time.
3 minutes.
255 West
Address.
47th Street.
Name and address.
Way ahead.
Name.
David Hughes. I see the numbers here. I'm not going to comment on them. I have an opinion. But what my question is, you moved $7 million out of the sewer fund into the general fund. This $7 million should be actually part of this money that we're deciding to how we're going to spend it. Okay, that $7 million was either, I think it was created by issuing a bond. That's how we got it.
That's not correct.
Right?
No.
You're wrong, Mr.
Well, he didn't know where it came from. I have a video where he says he doesn't know. So where did it come from?
It didn't come from a bond.
Where did it come from?
I don't know, but it didn't come from a bond.
You don't know where it came from, okay. So no one knows where the $7 million came from. But we do know that it was sitting in the sewer fund. And we have video of Lisa Vanderlane sitting here telling us you can't take those funds out of the sewer fund. But you guys moved it out of the sewer fund into the general fund, okay? But that's an extra $7 million that you haven't talked about. How are we going to use it? What's your plans for this $7
It'll be
million?
discussed at the meeting on the 14th.
Okay.
Yeah, that's when the auditor.
On the 14th, you're going to talk about the $7 million.
When the auditor said.
All of the township cash, including this part of the budget.
Okay.
Yes, that was transferred, as the auditor said, from the sewer to the general fund. That's been analyzed 1,000 times.
Not the general fund.
I can't hear that.
The $7 million was transferred to the capital fund from the sewer fund. That's when the auditor was here a couple months back. We said that to the public, so it's been analyzed and talked about a lot.
It hasn't been analyzed. It's been talked about, but it hasn't been explained, okay?
Right, motion to adjourn.
Make a motion to adjourn.
I'll second.
Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, I want to thank everyone for coming.